The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the Southern Pacific Railway line cutting through the Arizona desert, and Eleanor Vance pressed her gloved hand against the train window, watching the endless expanse of sand and scrub brush blur past while her heart hammered with the knowledge that somewhere ahead, outlaws often struck these very tracks. It was June of 1882, and she had been warned by no less than 5 people in Tucson that traveling alone to Tombstone was foolish for a woman of 23. But her father's telegram had been urgent, his mining operation in crisis, and Eleanor had never been one to shy from duty or danger. The other passengers dozed in their seats, lulled by the rhythmic clacking of wheels on rails and the sweltering heat that even the open windows could not relieve. Eleanor smoothed the dusty blue fabric of her traveling dress and tried to focus on the book in her lap, but the words swam before her eyes. She had been reading the same page for the past 20 minutes, distracted by thoughts of her father and the trouble he had mentioned only vaguely in his message. The Vance silver mine had been his life's work, the thing he had poured every dollar and every ounce of energy into since her mother had passed 7 years ago. A sharp whistle pierced the air, different from the train's own call, and Eleanor's head snapped up just as the locomotive began to slow with a horrible screeching of brakes. Around her, passengers stirred and muttered confused questions, pressing their faces to windows. Then came the unmistakable crack of gunfire, and a woman across the aisle screamed, "Everyone stay calm and nobody gets hurt." The door at the front of the car slammed open, and 3 men burst through, bandanas covering the lower halves of their faces, revolvers gleaming in their fists. The leader was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in dusty black with a hat pulled low over dark eyes. "This is simple. We want your valuables, your cash, your watches, your rings. Hand them over peacefully and you'll be on your way in 10 minutes. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat as her hand instinctively moved to the leather satchel at her feet. Inside was not just her own modest jewelry, but also $3,000 in cash, money her father desperately needed to pay his workers and keep the mine running another month. Without it, everything he had built would collapse. "You heard him." One of the other robbers, a wiry man with a croaking voice, began making his way down the aisle with a burlap sack. "Everything valuable and make it quick." Passengers fumbled with watches and necklaces, dropping them into the sack with trembling hands. An older gentleman tried to hide his wallet inside his vest, but the third robber spotted it and yanked it free roughly, shoving the man back into his seat. The leader remained at the front, his revolver trained on the crowd, his eyes constantly scanning for trouble. Eleanor's mind raced. She could not let them take her father's money. She simply could not. But what choice did she have? She had no weapon, no means of defense. Her fingers closed around the handle of her satchel just as the wiry robber reached her row. "The bag, miss, hand it over." He thrust the burlap sack toward her expectantly. "No." The word left her mouth before she could stop it, quiet but firm. The robber blinked. "What did you say?" "I said no." Eleanor raised her chin, her green eyes meeting his, even as her heart threatened to pound right out of her chest. "This money is not mine to give. It belongs to workers who need their wages, to families who will go hungry without it. I cannot hand it over." The car went silent except for the hiss of steam from the idling locomotive. Every eye turned to Eleanor, and she could feel the weight of their stares, the mixture of shock and fear and perhaps a touch of admiration. The wiry robber's eyes narrowed above his bandana. "Boss," he called back to the leader, "we got a problem here." The tall man in black strode down the aisle, his boots heavy on the wooden floor, and Eleanor forced herself not to shrink back as he loomed over her. Up close, she could see that his eyes were a striking shade of amber, unusual and intense, framed by dark lashes. There was something almost leonine about him, something wild and dangerous that made her throat go dry. What seems to be the trouble? His voice was lower than she had expected, with a slight rasp that spoke of whiskey and too many nights sleeping under stars. She won't hand over her bag. The wiry man sounded offended, as if Eleanor had insulted his mother. The leader's amber eyes shifted to Eleanor's face, and she met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away even though every instinct screamed at her to apologize, to obey, to save herself. His eyes searched hers for a long moment, and something flickered in their depths, something she could not name. "The bag, miss," he said quietly. "I do not want to hurt you, but I will have what we came for." "Then you will have to shoot me." Eleanor's voice shook only slightly. "Because I will not give you this money willingly." "Shoot me if you must, but know that you will be taking food from children's mouths, taking wages from honest men who have families to feed. If you can live with that, then go ahead and pull the trigger." The silence stretched impossibly long. The other passengers seemed to have stopped breathing. The wiry robber muttered a curse and started to reach for Eleanor's bag, but the leader held up one hand, stopping him. "Everyone who values their lives will close their eyes," the leader announced suddenly. "Now." Confused murmurs rippled through the car, but one by one, the passengers obeyed, squeezing their eyes shut. Eleanor kept hers open, locked on the amber gaze of the man who held her life in his hands. He stared back at her, and she saw something shift in his expression, a tightening around his eyes that might have been regret or might have been respect. "You have spine, miss. I will give you that." He spoke so quietly that only she could hear. "You are either the bravest or the most foolish woman I have ever met, and I have not decided which." "Does it matter?" Eleanor whispered back. "Either way, I cannot let you take this money." The corner of his eye creased, and she had the strange impression that beneath the bandana he might be smiling. "Keep your money then. But you did not see my face, understand? None of you saw anything." This last part was said louder, addressing the whole car. He turned and gestured to his companions. "We are done here. Mount up." "But boss, that bag probably has more than everything else combined," the wiry man protested. "I said we are done." There was steel in the leader's voice now, the kind of authority that brooked no argument. "Get back to the horses." The three men retreated toward the door, the burlap sack considerably lighter than it might have been. At the threshold, the leader paused and glanced back at Eleanor one last time. Their eyes met across the length of the car, and something passed between them, some unspoken understanding that made Eleanor's chest tighten. Then he touched 2 fingers to the brim of his hat in a sort of salute and was gone. The sound of galloping hooves faded into the distance, and the train lurched back into motion. Only then did Eleanor realize she was shaking, her hands trembling so badly that she had to clasp them together in her lap. The other passengers erupted into frantic conversation, some crying, others cursing the railroad company for not providing better security. The man whose wallet had been taken glared at Eleanor with undisguised resentment. "You put all our lives in danger with that foolish stunt," he said sharply. "What possessed you to defy armed robbers?" Eleanor could not answer. She was too busy trying to understand what had just happened, why the leader had spared her, why he had let her keep the money when he could have simply taken it. Those amber eyes haunted her, the intensity in them, the strange moment of connection that had felt almost intimate in its honesty. "She did not see my face," she thought, "but I saw his eyes. I saw something in them I did not expect." The train pulled into Tombstone an hour later, and Eleanor gathered her belongings on unsteady legs. The town sprawled before her in the late afternoon light, a collection of wooden buildings and dusty streets that buzzed with activity even at this hour. She could hear piano music drifting from one of the many saloons, the ring of a blacksmith's hammer, the shouts of men loading wagons with supplies. It was bigger than she had expected, more established, though still rough around the edges in the way of all mining towns. Her father was waiting on the platform, his face lined with new creases of worry that had not been there when Eleanor had last seen him 6 months ago. Richard Vance had once been a robust man, but recent troubles had stooped his shoulders and silvered more of his hair. He embraced Eleanor tightly, relief evident in every line of his body. "Thank God you made it safely," he breathed into her hair. "I heard there was trouble on the line, another robbery." "I am fine, father." Eleanor pulled back and managed a smile. "And I have the money, every dollar." His eyes widened. "They did not take it. It is a long story. Perhaps we should discuss it somewhere more private." They made their way through the crowded streets to the small house her father had rented near the mine. It was modest but clean, with whitewashed walls and simple furnishings. As Eleanor unpacked and her father made coffee, she recounted the events on the train, watching his expression shift from alarm to confusion to something like awe. "He just let you keep it." Richard set down his cup with a thunk. "Why would an outlaw do such a thing? I do not know." Eleanor stared into her own coffee, seeing amber eyes reflected in the dark liquid. "But he did. He could have shot me, could have taken everything, but he chose not to." "Well, thank heavens for small mercies." Her father reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "But please, Eleanor, promise me you will not take such risks again. I could never forgive myself if something happened to you because of my troubles." "Tell me about the mine," Eleanor said, changing the subject. "Your telegram was not specific." Richard sighed, and the weight of the world seemed to settle on his shoulders. "We hit a dry pocket 3 weeks ago. No silver, just rock. I had to dig deeper, reinforce tunnels, hire more men. The costs mounted faster than I anticipated. Some of the investors are getting nervous, talking about pulling out. If they do, I will have to shut down operations, sell everything just to pay the debts." Eleanor's heart ached for him. The mine was not just a business to her father. It was his purpose, his legacy, the future he wanted to build for her. "The money I brought will help, though, won't it? It will keep us afloat another month, maybe 2 if we are careful. But Eleanor, I need you to understand that this might all be for nothing. We might lose everything anyway." "We will not." Eleanor spoke with more confidence than she felt. "You have worked too hard, come too far. We will find a way." Over the following days, Eleanor settled into life in Tombstone, helping her father with bookkeeping and occasionally visiting the mine itself. The town was a strange mixture of civilization and lawlessness, where proper ladies in bustled dresses walked the same boardwalks as gamblers and gunslingers. The famous OK Corral shootout had happened just the previous October, and tension still simmered between different factions, though the Earp brothers had mostly moved on. Eleanor tried to focus on her work, on helping her father, but she found her thoughts drifting repeatedly to the train robbery, to amber eyes and a voice like gravel and honey. It was ridiculous, she told herself. The man was an outlaw, a criminal who made his living stealing from others. The fact that he had shown her mercy did not make him noble or good. She should put him from her mind entirely, but she could not. A week after her arrival, Eleanor accompanied her father into town to purchase supplies. They were just leaving the general store, arms laden with packages, when a commotion across the street caught her attention. A group of men had gathered outside the Silver Dollar Saloon, their voices raised in argument. One of them, a tall cowboy in dusty clothes and a worn hat, was trying to calm the others, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Eleanor could not see his face beneath the hat brim, but something about the way he carried himself, the breadth of his shoulders, sent a jolt of recognition through her. She froze on the boardwalk, packages forgotten, her eyes fixed on the scene. "I am telling you I did not cheat," the cowboy was saying, his voice steady despite the anger of the men surrounding him. "The cards fell as they fell. If you cannot afford to lose, you should not sit down at the table. You calling me a fool?" One of the other men, red-faced and swaying with drink, jabbed a finger at the cowboy's chest. "Nobody wins 5 hands in a row without cheating. 5 hands is nothing unusual when you know how to read the table." The cowboy's tone remained calm, but Eleanor could hear the edge creeping into it, the warning. "Take your losses like a man and walk away. Nobody needs to get hurt here." The drunk man's hand dropped to the gun at his hip, and Eleanor's breath caught. The crowd scattered, people diving for cover, but the cowboy did not move. He stood perfectly still, watching the drunk with an intensity that made Eleanor's skin prickle with awareness. "Do not do this," the cowboy said quietly. "You are drunk and angry, and you will regret it in the morning. If you live to see morning." "Father, we should go inside," Eleanor whispered, tugging at Richard's sleeve, but she could not tear her eyes away from the standoff. For a long, terrible moment, the drunk's fingers twitched near his revolver, and Eleanor was certain she was about to witness a killing. Then the sheriff, a weathered man with a star pinned to his vest, pushed through the crowd and stepped between them. "That is enough." The sheriff's hand rested on his own weapon. "Jackson, you are drunk and disorderly. Go sleep it off before I throw you in a cell." The drunk man muttered something foul but backed down, allowing his friends to lead him away down the street. The crowd began to disperse, excitement over. The cowboy tipped his hat to the sheriff and turned to leave, and for the first time, Eleanor got a clear look at his face. Her packages hit the boardwalk with a crash. The cowboy's head snapped toward the sound, and amber eyes met green. Recognition flared in them, followed immediately by alarm. He looked like he wanted to bolt, but something held him in place, kept him rooted to the spot as Eleanor stared at him across the dusty expanse of Allen Street. It was him, the train robber. The man who had spared her life and ridden away with her image burned into his mind, though she could not know that yet. "Eleanor, are you all right?" Her father bent to gather the fallen packages, oblivious to the silent drama playing out. "I am fine," Eleanor managed, though her voice sounded distant to her own ears. I lost my grip." The cowboy stood frozen for another heartbeat, then seemed to come to some decision. Instead of fleeing, he walked toward her with long, purposeful strides, crossing the street as if drawn by an invisible thread. He stopped a few feet away, and Eleanor could see that he looked different without the bandana, younger than she had imagined, perhaps 26 or 27. His face was lean and tanned, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw shadowed with several days' worth of stubble. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow, giving him a roguish appearance. "Miss Vance." He spoke her name with certainty, though she had never told him. "I did not expect to see you again." "You know my daughter." Richard looked between them, confused. "We have met," Eleanor said carefully, not taking her eyes off the cowboy. "Though not formally, I do not know your name." "Owen Navarro." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that fell across his forehead. "I have been working at the Double R Ranch outside town, but I was planning to move on soon." "Were you?" Eleanor heard the challenge in her own voice and could not quite believe she was speaking so boldly. "Why?" Something flickered in Owen's amber eyes, something like pain. "Because there are reasons a man like me should not stay in one place too long, Miss Vance. Reasons you are well aware of, I think." "I see." Eleanor bent to help her father with the packages, using the moment to collect herself. Her heart was racing, her palms damp inside her gloves. This was madness. She should denounce him right now, call for the sheriff, have him arrested for robbery. But even as the thought formed, she knew she would not do it, could not do it. "Well, it was a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Navarro," Richard said politely, though his brow was furrowed with concern at Eleanor's strange behavior. "Come along, Eleanor. We should get these supplies home." Eleanor allowed herself to be led away, but she could feel Owen's gaze on her back the entire walk home, could feel it like a physical touch burning through her dress. When she finally risked a glance over her shoulder, he was still standing in the middle of the street, his hat in his hands, watching her with an expression she could not decipher. That night, Eleanor lay awake in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling while moonlight painted silver squares on the floor. Owen Navarro. She turned the name over in her mind like a puzzle piece, trying to make it fit with the image of the outlaw who had held her life in his hands. What was he doing working at her ranch? Why had he stayed in Tombstone when any sensible criminal would have fled the territory after a robbery? And why had he looked at her with such naked longing before she had walked away? The questions chased each other in circles, until exhaustion finally pulled her under into restless sleep. The next morning, Eleanor was helping her father go over the mine's accounts when a knock sounded at the door. Richard answered it and returned moments later with a bewildered expression and a small package wrapped in brown paper. "This was just delivered for you," he said, handing it to Eleanor. There was no card, no indication of who sent it. Eleanor's fingers trembled slightly as she unwrapped the package. Inside was a book, a beautiful leather-bound edition of Whitman's Leaves of Grass. She opened the cover and found an inscription written in strong, slanting handwriting, "For the bravest woman I ever met. May you forgive my intrusion on the train. The pages deserve a better life than I could provide them." There was no signature, but Eleanor did not need one. She pressed the book to her chest, her eyes closing as a strange warmth spread through her. "Who is it from?" Richard asked. "A friend." Eleanor set the book carefully on the table. "Father, I need to go into town. Again, we were just there yesterday. I forgot something." It was a weak excuse and they both knew it, but Richard was too distracted by his ledgers to press. Eleanor changed into a fresh dress, pinned her dark hair up more carefully than usual, and set out into the growing heat of the day. She found Owen at the stable behind the general store, brushing down a large bay gelding with patient, methodical strokes. He looked up as her shadow fell across the straw-strewn floor, and something complicated crossed his face. "Miss Vance." He set down the brush but did not move toward her. "You should not be here. I wanted to thank you for the book." Eleanor stepped into the stable, inhaling the familiar scent of hay and leather and horse. "It is beautiful, but you should not have spent your money on me." "I wanted to." Owen's voice was rough. "After what I tried to take from you, it seemed the least I could do." "You did not take anything, though. You let me keep the money, even though your companions wanted it." "That does not make me a good man, Eleanor." The use of her first name sent a shiver down her spine. "I have done things I am not proud of, things that would make you run from me if you knew." "Then tell me." Eleanor moved closer, drawn by the torment in his eyes. "Tell me who you are, Owen Navarro. Tell me why an outlaw is working at her ranch in Tombstone instead of running for the border." Owen was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he struggled with himself. Finally, he gestured to a bale of hay. "Sit. This is not a short story." Eleanor sat, arranging her skirts, and Owen leaned against the stable wall opposite her, his arms crossed over his chest as if to hold himself together. "I was not always a robber," he began quietly. 3 years ago, I was a rancher down in New Mexico territory, not rich but doing well enough. I had a small spread, good cattle, plans to marry a girl from town. Then the railroad came through and they wanted my land for their tracks. I refused to sell. It was my home, my future. So they trumped up charges against me, said I had stolen cattle that were mine by right. The local judge was in their pocket. I was facing 10 years in prison for a crime I did not commit. He paused, his hands clenching into fists. Eleanor waited, afraid to break the spell. I ran. What else could I do? I lost everything. My land, my good name, the woman I was going to marry. She would not even look at me after that, believed I was guilty. I drifted for a while, taking work where I could find it, always moving. Then I fell in with bad company, men who had also been wronged by the system, who saw robbery as a way to take back what had been stolen from them. It started small. A payroll here, a bank there. Then it escalated to trains. The robbery where you met me, Eleanor said softly. That was not your first. No, but I swear to you I never hurt anyone who did not try to hurt me first. And after that day on the train, after I looked into your eyes and saw the fire in them, the courage. He shook his head. I could not do it anymore. I told my partners I was done. They did not take it well, but they let me go because I had saved their lives more than once. I came here, found honest work at the ranch, tried to start over. But men like me do not get clean slates, Eleanor. Eventually someone will recognize me. The law will catch up. I will hang or spend the rest of my life in prison. Or you could disappear, Eleanor heard herself say. Go somewhere no one knows you, California, Oregon, anywhere far from here. I could. Owen's amber eyes locked on hers. But then I saw you in town yesterday, and I realized I have been lying to myself. I did not stay in Tombstone because of the ranch work. I stayed because I could not forget your face, Eleanor. From the moment you defied me on that train, you have haunted every waking thought and every dream. I know I have no right to feel this way, no right to even speak to you, but I cannot seem to make myself leave. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. She should be scandalized, should be afraid, should run back to her father and tell him everything. Instead, she found herself standing and crossing the space between them, until she was close enough to see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes, close enough to smell the clean scent of soap and leather on his skin. I have thought about you two, she whispered. Every day since the robbery. I told myself I was being foolish, that you were a criminal, that I should put you from my mind, but I could not. And when I saw you yesterday, when I recognized you, I felt. She trailed off, unable to name the emotion. Relief, Owen finished for her. Like finding something you did not know you had lost. Yes, Eleanor breathed the word. Exactly like that. Owen reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingertips grazed her cheek, and Eleanor's eyes fluttered closed at the contact. When she opened them again, Owen was looking at her with such raw hunger that it stole her breath. This is dangerous, he said hoarsely. If anyone finds out who I am, being associated with me will destroy your reputation. I do not care. You should. But I do not. Eleanor caught his hand before he could pull it away, pressing it against her cheek. I am tired of always doing what is expected, what is proper. For once in my life I want to choose something just for me, even if it is reckless, even if it is wrong. It is not wrong, Owen said fiercely. Feeling this way cannot be wrong, no matter what the world says. He bent his head slowly, giving her every opportunity to stop him, but Eleanor only tilted her face up in invitation. Their lips met softly, tentatively, a question asked and answered. Then Owen's arms came around her, pulling her close, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and consuming. Eleanor clung to his shoulders, lost in sensations she had never experienced, the scratch of his stubble against her skin, the taste of coffee on his lips, the solid warmth of his body against hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "What are we going to do?" he asked quietly. "I do not know." Eleanor's hands fisted in his shirt. "But I cannot walk away from you. I tried, and I cannot. Your father, if he knew what I was, then we will not tell him. Not yet. Not until we figure out what this is between us." Owen pulled back enough to look into her eyes. "This is courting danger in the worst way, Eleanor. If my past catches up with me, you could be caught in the aftermath. Then we will face it together." Eleanor straightened her spine. "I meant what I said on the train, Owen. I am not afraid." "You should be." But he was smiling as he said it, a real smile that transformed his whole face and made him look younger, less haunted. "You are either the bravest or the most foolish woman I have ever met." "You said that before." Eleanor smiled back. "Have you decided which yet?" "I think perhaps you are both." Owen captured her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "And I think I am doomed." Over the following weeks, Eleanor and Owen conducted what could only be called a clandestine courtship. They met in secret, whenever Eleanor could slip away from her father's watchful eye. Stolen hours in the stable or brief encounters on the edges of town where prying eyes were less likely to spot them. Owen told her stories of his travels, the vast spaces of New Mexico and Texas, the starlit nights spent sleeping rough, the beauty of wild places. Eleanor shared her own history, her mother's death, her father's obsession with the mine, her own dreams of seeing more of the world someday. They talked for hours, discovering shared loves of poetry and music, debating philosophy and politics, arguing good-naturedly about everything from the best way to make coffee to whether progress was always worth its cost. Between conversations, there were kisses that grew bolder with each meeting, touches that lingered, glances weighted with longing. Eleanor knew she was playing with fire. Every moment she spent with Owen was a risk, a gamble that could ruin her if discovered. But she had never felt so alive, so utterly and completely herself. With Owen, she did not have to be the dutiful daughter or the proper lady. She could simply be Eleanor, with all her contradictions and complications, and he accepted every piece of her without judgment. Owen, for his part, found himself falling deeper with each passing day. He had thought himself incapable of feeling this way again after everything he had lost, but Eleanor awakened something in him that had been dormant for years. She made him want to be better, to find a way to truly leave his past behind and build a legitimate future. He began saving every dollar of his ranch wages, planning for a day when perhaps they could leave Tombstone together, start fresh somewhere his face was not on wanted posters. But the past, as it so often does, refused to stay buried. It was late July when trouble arrived in the form of two riders who dismounted outside the Silver Dollar Saloon and asked questions about Owen Navarro. They were bounty hunters, hard-eyed men who made their living tracking fugitives, and they had heard rumors that one of the men involved in a series of train robberies had been seen in Tombstone. Owen heard about them within an hour. The town's gossip network was efficient, and he had cultivated friendships with enough people to ensure he had warning when danger approached. He found Eleanor in the small garden behind her father's house, her hands in the dirt as she tended struggling vegetable plants in the heat. "Eleanor." His voice was tight with urgency. "We need to talk." She looked up and immediately saw the fear in his eyes. Without a word, she stood and brushed off her hands, following him to the small shed at the back of the property where they could speak privately. "There are men looking for me," Owen said without preamble. "Bounty hunters. They know I am in Tombstone." Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. "How much time do you have?" "Not much. Maybe a day, maybe less, before they find someone who will identify me for the reward money. He gripped her shoulders. I have to leave, Eleanor, tonight. I should have gone weeks ago, but I kept telling myself I had more time. Then I am coming with you. The words were out before Eleanor could think them through, but once spoken, she knew they were true. I will not let you face this alone. Absolutely not. Owen's voice was sharp with panic. Do you understand what you would be giving up? Your father, your home, any chance at a respectable life. Eleanor, running with me would make you a fugitive too. I cannot ask that of you. You are not asking, I am offering. Eleanor caught his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. Owen, I love you. I have loved you since that day on the train, I think, even if I did not know it yet, and I will not lose you now, not when I have just found you. Eleanor. His voice broke on her name. Tell me you do not feel the same, she challenged. Look me in the eye and tell me you do not love me, and I will let you go. Owen closed his eyes, his jaw clenched. When he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. I cannot. God help me, I cannot. I love you more than I have ever loved anything in this life, but that is exactly why I need you to stay. I will not destroy your future. My future is with you. Eleanor pressed her forehead to his. Please, Owen. Please do not ask me to stay behind and spend the rest of my life wondering where you are, if you are safe, if you are even alive. I cannot bear it. Owen stood frozen for a long moment, torn between what he wanted and what he knew was right. Finally, he released a shuddering breath and pulled Eleanor into a tight embrace. We would have to go far, he said into her hair. California maybe, or up into Oregon territory, somewhere we can disappear completely. You would have to leave everything behind, Eleanor. Your father, your friends, the life you know. I know. Eleanor tightened her arms around him. I will write to my father once we are safe, explain everything. He will be hurt, angry perhaps, but he will understand eventually. The mine is stable now, he will be all right. Are you absolutely certain? Owen pulled back to search her face. Because once we do this, there is no going back. Eleanor thought of her father, of the small house in Tombstone, of the safe, predictable life she had always known. Then she thought of waking up every morning beside Owen, of building something new together in a place where his past could not reach them, of choosing love over security. I have never been more certain of anything, she said. They planned through the afternoon, speaking in urgent whispers. Owen would gather supplies and horses, while Eleanor packed what she could carry and wrote a letter to her father. They would leave after dark, before the bounty hunters narrowed their search. It would be hard riding, pushing through the night to put distance between themselves and Tombstone, but they both agreed it was necessary. As the sun began its descent, painting the desert in shades of orange and crimson, Eleanor sat at the small desk in her room and tried to find words to explain the unexplainable to her father. The pen felt heavy in her hand. Dearest father, she began, then stopped. How did you tell someone you loved that you were leaving, possibly forever, with a man wanted by the law? How did you make them understand that sometimes love required impossible choices? She started over several times before finally settling on simple honesty. She told him about the train robbery, about recognizing Owen, about the weeks of secret meetings and the love that had grown between them. She explained Owen's past, his innocence of the original charges, his regret for the crimes he had committed afterward. She assured her father that Owen was a good man who had been dealt a bad hand, that she was choosing this path with open eyes and a willing heart. I know you will think me foolish, she wrote, and perhaps you are right. But I would rather have a short life filled with love than a long one filled with regret. Please do not hate me for this choice. Please try to understand. I love you and I will miss you, but I love Owen too, and I cannot let him go. She sealed the letter and left it on her bed where her father would find it in the morning. Then she packed a small bag with practical clothes, a few precious belongings, and the book Owen had given her. She changed into a split riding skirt and boots, braided her hair back, and waited for darkness. Owen came for her just after midnight, leading 2 horses saddled and ready. He helped Eleanor mount, his hands lingering at her waist, and their eyes met in the moonlight. "Last chance," he said quietly. "If you have any doubts at all, speak them now." "No doubts." Eleanor settled into the saddle and gathered the reins. "Let us go." They rode out of Tombstone, heading northwest, the stars blazing overhead like diamonds scattered on black velvet. Behind them, the town slept, unaware that 2 souls were fleeing into the unknown. Eleanor did not look back. The first days were the hardest. They rode from before dawn until after dark, stopping only to rest the horses and grab a few hours of sleep in turns. Owen pushed them hard, knowing the bounty hunters would not be far behind once Eleanor's disappearance was discovered and connected to his flight. They avoided towns and major roads, following deer trails and dry washes, places where tracking would be difficult. Eleanor had never experienced such physical hardship. Her muscles ached from the constant riding, her skin burned despite the shade of her hat, and exhaustion pulled at her like a weight. But she never complained, never suggested turning back. Owen watched her with a mixture of admiration and guilt, amazed at her resilience even as he hated himself for putting her through this. On the 5th day, they finally slowed their pace. They had crossed into California, winding through the Mojave Desert toward the mountains beyond, and Owen felt reasonably certain they had lost any pursuit. That night, they made camp near a spring, the first real rest they had allowed themselves. Eleanor collapsed against a rock with a groan of relief while Owen tended the horses. When he returned with their meager supplies, she was already half asleep, her head nodding forward. He smiled softly and settled beside her, pulling her against his chest. "I am sorry," he murmured into her hair. "Sorry for all of this. You deserve better than sleeping on rocks and eating hardtack. I am exactly where I want to be." Eleanor's words were slurred with exhaustion, but her hand found his and squeezed. "With you." Owen pressed a kiss to the top of her head and held her while she slept, keeping watch under the vast canopy of stars. He had never expected to find this kind of peace again, this feeling of rightness despite the circumstances. Eleanor had given up everything for him, trusted him with her future, her life. The weight of that gift pressed on his chest, terrifying and precious in equal measure. They reached the foothills of the Sierra Nevada in mid-August, and Owen began looking for a place where they could settle, at least temporarily. They needed to establish some kind of life, find work and income to support themselves. Eleanor's money from Tombstone would not last forever. In a small town called Coloma, once bustling with gold fever but now mostly quiet, they found opportunity. Owen took work at a lumber camp in the mountains, where men asked few questions about your past if you could swing an axe and did not mind hard labor. Eleanor found employment with a widow who ran a boarding house, helping with cooking and cleaning in exchange for a small room and wages. They rented a tiny cabin on the outskirts of town, little more than 1 room with a wood stove and a narrow bed, but to Eleanor it felt like a palace. It was theirs, a space they had claimed together, and that made it precious. The work was grueling for both of them. Owen came home each night covered in sawdust and sweat, his hands rough and blistered despite the calluses he already had. Eleanor's hands were raw from scrubbing laundry and floors, her back aching from carrying heavy buckets and bending over the stove. But in the evenings, when they sat together watching the sun set over the mountains, none of that mattered. They had each other, and they had freedom. And for now, that was enough. Slowly, they built a life. They made friends among the other workers and townspeople, careful never to reveal too much about their pasts but friendly enough to avoid suspicion. Owen introduced Eleanor as his wife, and though they had never spoken vows before a preacher, it felt true in every way that mattered. They belonged to each other, bound by choice and love rather than law or ceremony. As autumn painted the mountains in gold and crimson, Eleanor began to notice changes in her body. She was tired more often, queasy in the mornings, her breasts tender. She tried to dismiss it at first, but when her monthly bleeding did not come, she could no longer deny the truth. She was carrying Owen's child. The realization brought a complicated tangle of emotions. Joy, because she wanted this baby with every fiber of her being, wanted to build a family with Owen. Fear, because they were still fugitives living under assumed names, because she had no access to proper medical care, because she did not know how they would manage another mouth to feed. Uncertainty, because she did not know how Owen would react to the news. She told him on a crisp October evening as they sat by the fire after supper. Owen had been whittling a piece of wood, some small project he was working on, and Eleanor watched the play of firelight across his features as she worked up her courage. "Owen, I have something to tell you." He looked up, immediately alert to the serious tone in her voice. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine, actually." Eleanor twisted her hands in her lap. "I am with child." The whittling knife clattered to the floor. Owen stared at her, his expression cycling through shock, confusion, and then a slow, wondering joy that made Eleanor's eyes sting with tears. "A baby." His voice was barely a whisper. "Eleanor, are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor." Eleanor pressed a hand to her still flat stomach. "I am about 2 months along, I think. The baby will come in the spring." Owen crossed the small cabin in 2 strides and dropped to his knees in front of her chair, his hands covering hers on her belly. "A baby," he repeated, awestruck. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Eleanor searched his face anxiously. "I know this was not planned, that it will make things more complicated." "Happy," Owen laughed, a sound of pure elation that Eleanor had rarely heard from him. "Eleanor, I am terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed, but yes, I am happy. So incredibly happy." He pressed his forehead to their joined hands. "I did not think I would ever have this. A family. A home. Someone who loved me enough to give me these gifts." Eleanor's tears spilled over, running down her cheeks as she cradled his head. "We are going to have a baby," she whispered, letting the reality sink in. "We are going to have a baby," Owen echoed. He looked up at her, his amber eyes bright. "And I am going to marry you properly as soon as we can find a preacher who will not ask too many questions. We do not need a ceremony to make this real. Maybe not, but I want to give you that anyway. I want our child to have legitimate parents, insofar as that is possible. I want you to have my name legally, Eleanor Navarro." The name sent a warm shiver through her. "I like the sound of that." 2 weeks later, they stood before a traveling preacher in a small church in a town whose name Eleanor could not remember afterward. She wore a simple blue dress and carried wildflowers that Owen had picked that morning. There were no guests, no witnesses except the preacher's wife and the candles burning on the altar. But when Owen slipped a ring onto her finger, a plain gold band he had traded a week's wages for, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Eleanor felt the truth of it resonate through her entire being. She was Eleanor Navarro now, for better or worse, bound to this man and the life they were building together. Winter came to the mountains with fury, bringing snow that buried the cabin up to the windowsills and made travel nearly impossible. The lumber camp shut down until spring, and Owen took whatever odd jobs he could find to keep them fed. Money was tight, food scarce, and the cold seeped through every crack in their poorly insulated cabin. But there were gifts in the hardship, too. Long evenings spent curled together under every blanket they owned, talking or reading aloud by candlelight. The miracle of feeling their baby move for the first time, a flutter like butterfly wings beneath Eleanor's skin. The quiet satisfaction of making a home together, of solving problems as a team, of learning each other's rhythms and moods. Eleanor's belly swelled with the pregnancy, and Owen treated her like she was made of glass, insisting she rest while he took over the household chores. Eleanor protested that she was pregnant, not dying, but secretly she loved his attentiveness, the way his face lit up whenever he felt the baby kick, the hours he spent talking to her stomach as if the child could already hear him. "What should we name the baby?" Eleanor asked one night in early March, her hands resting on her prominent belly while Owen's head lay pillowed on her lap. "I have been thinking about that." Owen's fingers traced idle patterns on the curve of her stomach. "If it is a boy, perhaps Thomas, after my father. If it is a girl—" "What about Grace? For the Grace you showed me when you could have condemned me. Grace Navarro." Eleanor tested the name, smiling. "I like it. And Thomas Navarro is strong. Good names for a strong child. This child will have to be strong." Owen's expression turned serious. "With parents like us, a past like ours, life will not be easy." "Life is not easy for anyone," Eleanor countered, "but our child will have something precious. They will have love, Owen, so much love." The baby came on a rainy April morning, arriving with the spring melt and the first wildflowers pushing through the mud. Eleanor's labor was long and difficult, and for several terrifying hours, Owen was certain he was going to lose her. He paced the cabin like a caged animal while the doctor the widow had sent for worked with Eleanor behind a makeshift curtain, her cries of pain shredding his heart. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a new sound joined Eleanor's labored breathing, the thin, reedy wail of a newborn. Owen's knees went weak with relief. "Mr. Navarro," the doctor emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth, "you have a son, a healthy boy, and your wife is tired but well." Owen barely heard the rest. He pushed past the doctor to where Eleanor lay propped against pillows, her hair sweat-soaked and her face pale with exhaustion, but smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in cloth, and when Owen drew closer, he saw a small red face, eyes screwed shut, mouth working soundlessly. "Owen, meet your son." Eleanor's voice was hoarse but filled with wonder. "Thomas Owen Navarro." Owen reached out with trembling hands and carefully took the baby from her. The weight was almost nothing, but the responsibility of it nearly crushed him. This tiny person, this perfect little being, depended on him for everything. It was terrifying and miraculous in equal measure. "Hello, Thomas," he whispered, touching a finger to the baby's impossibly small hand. Immediately, tiny fingers closed around his, gripping with surprising strength. Owen's vision blurred with tears. "I am your father, and I promise you I will spend every day of my life trying to be worthy of that title." Eleanor watched them, her heart so full it ached. Her two boys, her whole world contained in this small cabin in the mountains. They had come so far from that train in the Arizona desert, through danger and hardship and uncertainty. But looking at Owen cradling their son with such tenderness, seeing the love shining in his eyes, Eleanor knew she would make the same choice again in a heartbeat. The next months passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder. Thomas proved to be a healthy baby with a good set of lungs and an appetite that kept Eleanor constantly feeding him. Owen was a devoted father, walking the floor with the baby at all hours, changing diapers without complaint, singing soft Spanish lullabies he remembered from his own childhood. As spring turned to summer, they fell into new rhythms. Owen returned to work at the lumber camp, bringing in steady wages now that Eleanor could not work with a baby to care for. Money was still tight, but they managed. They always managed. On a warm evening in June, Owen came home to find Eleanor in the rocking chair he had built for her, nursing Thomas while humming a tune. The sight stopped him in the doorway, struck by the simple beauty of it, the peace that radiated from his small family. "What are you thinking?" Eleanor asked, noticing his stare. Owen crossed to them and knelt beside the chair, his hand cupping the back of Thomas's downy head. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest man alive. That somehow, despite everything I have done, everything I have lost, I ended up here, with you, with him. I am thinking that maybe grace is real after all." Eleanor reached out and touched his face, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. "We have come a long way from that train. We have." Owen turned his head and kissed her palm. "And I would do it all again, every hard mile, every moment of fear, if it meant ending up here with you. As would I." Eleanor shifted Thomas to her shoulder, patting his back gently. "No regrets, Owen, not a single one." But even as she spoke, a shadow crossed Owen's face, something Eleanor had learned to recognize over their time together. The fear that lived in him always, the worry that his past would catch up and destroy the life they had built. "What is wrong?" Eleanor set Thomas in his cradle and took Owen's hands. "Talk to me." Owen sighed and led her to sit on the edge of their bed. "I saw something in town today, a wanted poster. It was old, the ink faded, but it was me, Eleanor. My face, my name, a reward for my capture." Someone had posted it in the general store. Eleanor's stomach dropped. "Did anyone recognize you?" "I do not think so. I look different now, older with the beard. And the poster said I was wanted in New Mexico territory, hundreds of miles from here. But Eleanor..." He gripped her hands tighter. "What if someone does make the connection? What if they come for me? I could not bear it if you and Thomas were caught up in that." "Then we will leave," Eleanor said immediately. "We will go somewhere even more remote, somewhere no one will think to look. We cannot keep running forever." "Why not?" Eleanor's chin lifted stubbornly. "If that is what it takes to keep our family together, then that is what we will do." Owen pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "How did I ever deserve you?" "You did not deserve me," Eleanor said, her tone light despite the seriousness of the situation. "You got lucky." Despite his fears, nothing came of the wanted poster. The weeks turned to months with no sign of pursuit, and gradually Owen relaxed again, though Eleanor noticed he remained more vigilant, more aware of strangers in town. Thomas grew rapidly, transforming from a tiny infant into a chubby baby who smiled and cooed and grabbed at everything within reach. He had Owen's amber eyes and Eleanor's dark hair, and everyone who saw him remarked on what a beautiful child he was. Eleanor could not argue. As autumn returned, painting the mountains in familiar shades of gold and crimson, Eleanor began to notice the same signs she had recognized the previous year. The exhaustion, the nausea, the missed monthly bleeding. She was pregnant again. This time, the news filled her with less anxiety and more simple joy. They knew they could manage now, had proven they could survive anything together. When she told Owen, he whooped with delight and spun her around the cabin, only stopping when she laughingly reminded him that spinning a pregnant woman was not advisable. Their second child, a daughter they named Grace, arrived the following May during a thunderstorm that rattled the cabin windows and turned the road to mud. Her birth was easier than Thomas's had been, and when Owen held his daughter for the first time, Eleanor watched him fall in love all over again. "Two," Owen marveled. looking between the baby in his arms and Thomas, now a year old and toddling around the cabin with determined steps. "We have 2 children, Eleanor, a family. We do." Eleanor smiled tiredly from the bed. "Are you disappointed it is not another boy, disappointed?" Owen looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Eleanor, this little girl is perfect, absolutely perfect." He gazed down at Grace's tiny face, her rosebud mouth and dark lashes. "I am going to have to beat the boys off with a stick when she gets older, I can already tell." Eleanor laughed. "She is 1 hour old, Owen. Give her time to grow before you start worrying about suitors." As Grace grew, it became clear she had inherited her mother's fierce spirit along with her father's eyes. She was a demanding baby who knew exactly what she wanted and wailed until she got it. Thomas, meanwhile, developed into a quiet, thoughtful child who preferred observing to participating, who could entertain himself for hours with simple toys. Watching them grow, Eleanor sometimes felt overwhelmed by the love she had for them, for this life they had created together. There were still hard days, times when money ran short or sickness struck, or the fear of discovery kept her awake at night. But there was also so much joy, so many moments of pure happiness that made every sacrifice worthwhile. One evening, when Thomas was 3 and Grace was approaching her first birthday, Owen came home with unexpected news. The owner of the lumber company was retiring and had offered to sell the operation to a group of the workers, Owen among them. It would require a significant investment, money they did not have, but it would also mean stability, ownership, a legitimate business that could support their family for years to come. "What do you think?" Owen asked Eleanor as they discussed it after the children were asleep. "I know it is risky. We would have to borrow money, put ourselves in debt. But Eleanor, this could be our chance to truly build something to give our children a better future." Eleanor thought about it carefully. The risk was real, but so was the opportunity. And they had proven time and again that they could overcome challenges together. "I think we should do it," she said finally. "I think we should bet on ourselves, on this life we have built. We have been running and hiding for years, Owen. Maybe it is time to stand still, to put down roots, to believe that we deserve good things." Owen searched her face. "You are sure?" "I am sure." They took the risk. Owen and 3 other workers pooled their resources and borrowed the rest, purchasing the lumber operation and splitting ownership 4 ways. It meant long hours and hard work, meant Owen was gone from dawn until dark managing crews and contracts and finances. But it also meant security, a steady income that grew as the business prospered. Eleanor, meanwhile, found her own purpose beyond motherhood. She started a small school in the cabin, teaching the children of other workers to read and write. It began with just 3 students but quickly grew to a dozen, then more. The parents paid what they could, sometimes in cash but often in trade, fresh vegetables or meat, or help with repairs to the cabin. The years passed, each one adding new layers to their life together. Thomas started helping at the lumber yard as soon as he was old enough, learning the business from Owen. Grace proved to be a voracious reader, devouring every book Eleanor could get her hands on. 2 more children joined the family. Another boy they named James and a second daughter they called Sarah. Owen's beard grew streaked with silver, and lines appeared at the corners of his eyes, but to Eleanor he had never been more handsome. She herself had changed too, her hands roughened by work, her figure softened by 4 pregnancies, strands of gray threading through her dark hair. But when Owen looked at her, she still saw the same love and desire that had been there that first day in the stable in Tombstone. One evening, sitting on the porch of their cabin while their children played in the yard, Owen took Eleanor's hand. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Leaving everything for me, choosing this life. Eleanor looked at their children, at Thomas showing James how to whittle, at Grace reading aloud to Sarah in the shade of a tree. She looked at the mountains rising in the distance, at the small but sturdy cabin they had expanded over the years, at the community they had become part of. Then she looked at Owen, at the man who had stolen her heart on a train so many years ago. "Not for a single moment," she said. "You gave me adventure, Owen. You gave me love and family and a life bigger than I ever imagined. How could I regret that?" Owen raised her hand to his lips. "I think about that day sometimes. What would have happened if I had taken your father's money, if I had ridden away and never looked back? What my life would be now?" "Empty," Eleanor said softly, "as mine would have been without you. I was so certain I did not deserve happiness, that men like me did not get second chances. But you proved me wrong, Eleanor. You gave me everything. We gave each other everything." Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder. "That is what love does." As the sun set over the California mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold, Eleanor closed her eyes and listened to her children's laughter, felt the solid warmth of Owen beside her, and knew that this was what happiness looked like. Not perfect, not without struggle, but real and earned and deeply felt. The years continued their steady march. The lumber business thrived, and Owen's partnership became increasingly valuable. They were able to build a proper house, larger than the cabin, with separate rooms for each child and even a small library for Eleanor's growing collection of books. The school expanded until Eleanor hired another teacher to help her, and together they educated 24 children at a time. Thomas grew into a capable young man who took over more and more of the lumber operation, allowing Owen to step back slightly as his body aged, and the hard physical labor became more difficult. Grace attended a teaching college in Sacramento, returning with grand ideas about education reform that she implemented alongside Eleanor. James proved to have a gift for numbers and began handling the business's finances. Sarah, the youngest, showed early signs of becoming an artist, filling pages with sketches of the world around her. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Owen took Eleanor on a trip, just the two of them, leaving the children to manage the house and business for a week. They traveled to San Francisco, a city Eleanor had never seen, and stayed in a fine hotel that felt impossibly luxurious after years of frontier living. Walking along the waterfront, watching ships come and go in the harbor, Eleanor marveled at how far they had come. "Do you remember Tombstone?" she asked. "That dusty, desperate town where we met." "I remember every detail." Owen tucked her hand into the crook of his arm. "I remember the first time I saw you on that train, how your eyes blazed with defiance. I remember thinking you were either the bravest or the most foolish woman I had ever met. You still have not decided which, have you?" Eleanor smiled up at him. "Oh, I decided years ago." Owen stopped and turned to face her, his hands coming up to cup her face. "You are brave, Eleanor. The bravest person I have ever known, and I have spent 20 years trying to be worthy of that courage, of the faith you had in me when I had none in myself. Owen." Eleanor's eyes stung with tears. "I love you." He said it simply, as he had said it thousands of times over their years together, but the words still held power. "I loved you the moment you defied me on that train, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." Eleanor rose on her toes and kissed him, there on the waterfront with the cry of seagulls overhead and the smell of salt in the air. When they broke apart, she pressed her forehead to his. "I love you too. Always." They returned home to find that Grace had gotten engaged in their absence, to a young lawyer who had moved to Coloma the previous year. The wedding was planned for the following spring, and Eleanor threw herself into preparations with the same intensity she brought to everything. She sewed Grace's wedding dress by hand, white silk with delicate lace, and cried when her daughter tried it on for the first time. "You look beautiful," Eleanor whispered, adjusting the veil. "So grown up." "Mother, are you crying?" Grace turned, concerned. Happy tears. Eleanor dabbed at her eyes. "I am just remembering my own wedding. It was nothing like this, just a simple ceremony in a small church, but I was so happy, Grace, so full of hope for the future. And looking at you now, I see that same hope, that same joy. It makes everything worthwhile." Grace hugged her tightly. "I want what you and Father have. That kind of love, that partnership. You have shown me what marriage should be. Then you are already starting ahead of where we did." Eleanor smiled. "We had to figure it all out as we went, your father and I. But you have seen a good example. You know what to look for, what to build toward." The wedding was beautiful, held in the small church the community had built together years ago. Grace looked radiant. Her husband looked dazed by his good fortune, and Owen cried unashamedly as he walked his daughter down the aisle. Eleanor sat in the front row between Thomas and James, watching her first baby become a wife, and thought her heart might burst from the fullness of it. At the reception, held in the lumber yard cleared of equipment and decorated with flowers and lanterns, Owen pulled Eleanor onto the makeshift dance floor as a fiddle player struck up a waltz. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Navarro?" he asked formally, bowing. "Always, Mr. Navarro." Eleanor placed her hand in his, and they swept into the familiar movements, as comfortable together as breathing after so many years. "Our baby is married," Owen said, his voice thick with emotion. "She is. And soon we will be grandparents if I am reading the signs correctly." Owen's eyes widened. "Grace is expecting, not yet, but soon I think." Eleanor smiled. "The way her husband looks at her, it will not be long." "Grandparents," Owen repeated wonderingly. "When did we get old enough for that?" Gradually, then all at once. Eleanor rested her head on his shoulder as they swayed. "But I do not mind growing old, Owen. Not when I am doing it with you." Eleanor's prediction proved correct. Within the year, Grace gave them their first grandchild, a boy they named Owen Richard after both grandfathers. Holding the baby for the first time, feeling the weight of a new generation, Owen felt the last pieces of his past finally fall away. He was not a train robber anymore, not a fugitive or an outlaw. He was a grandfather, a businessman, a pillar of his community. Eleanor had not just saved his life that day on the train. She had given him a whole new one. More grandchildren followed as the years passed. Thomas married a sweet girl from town and had 3 daughters in quick succession. James remained happily unmarried, dedicating himself to growing the lumber business into one of the largest in the region. Sarah shocked everyone by running off with a traveling photographer and sending letters from exotic locations, New York and Chicago, and even once from Paris. Owen and Eleanor grew older together, their hair silvering, their steps slowing, but their love never dimming. They still sat together on the porch in the evenings, still held hands while walking through town, still looked at each other with the same wonder and affection that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. On an autumn evening in 1904, 22 years after they had fled Tombstone together, Owen and Eleanor sat in rocking chairs on their porch, watching the sun set over mountains that had become as familiar as old friends. They were in their 60s now, grandparents many times over, respected members of a community they had helped build. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been if you had never met me?" Owen asked, echoing a conversation they had had so many years ago. Eleanor considered it. "Sometimes. I think I would have stayed in Tombstone, helped my father with the mine, maybe eventually married some respectable man, I would have had a comfortable life, probably. A safe life. You wish you had. Eleanor turned to look at him, this man who had been her whole world for more than 2 decades, whose face she knew better than her own, whose heart beat in rhythm with hers. Not for a single second. That safe, comfortable life would have been half a life, Owen. With you, I got everything. Adventure and danger and more love than I ever imagined possible. I got our children, our grandchildren, this beautiful place we built together. How could I wish for anything else? Owen reached over and took her hand, their fingers interlocking automatically after so many years of practice. I have been thinking about that day on the train. The day I chose to spare you instead of taking your money. It was the best decision I ever made, Eleanor. It changed the course of my entire life. Mine too. Eleanor squeezed his hand. I defied you because I was angry about the injustice of it all, because I could not stand the thought of those workers losing their wages. I had no idea I was meeting the man I would spend my life with. The bravest woman I ever met, Owen smiled. I finally decided, you know. You are brave, not foolish, though sometimes the line between them is thin. Eleanor laughed. I suppose it is, but I do not regret my bravery. It brought me to you. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and stars began to appear, the same stars that had guided them across the desert so many years ago. Inside the house, they could hear their granddaughter playing piano, the notes drifting out through open windows. I do not know how much more time we have, Owen said quietly. I am not getting any younger, and neither are you. Then we will make the most of whatever time we have left. Eleanor rested her head against his shoulder. Together, as we have always been. Together, Owen agreed. Always together. The years were kind to them, granting them both health and clarity well into their 70s. They watched more grandchildren grow and marry, saw great-grandchildren born, witnessed the turn of the century and all the changes it brought. The lumber business expanded under James's management until they had operations in 3 states. Grace became a renowned educator whose methods were adopted in schools across California. Thomas took over the company leadership from Owen, proving himself a capable and fair-minded businessman. Sarah returned from her travels with a husband and portfolio of photographs that captured the changing face of America. Through it all, Owen and Eleanor remained the heart of their family, the foundation on which everything else was built. Their love story became legend among their descendants, the tale of the train robber and the brave woman who had changed his life, who had chosen love over security, and built something beautiful from the ruins of the past. Owen passed first, on a quiet morning in early spring, sitting in his favorite chair with Eleanor's hand in his. He had been growing weaker for months, his heart finally failing after more than 70 years of beating. But he died peacefully, surrounded by family, with Eleanor whispering that she loved him one last time. His last words were her name, spoken like a prayer, like a promise kept. Eleanor grieved deeply, the loss of her partner like losing a limb, but she did not break. She had too much of Owen in her children and grandchildren to ever truly be without him. She lived 3 more years, watching another generation grow, telling stories of the old days to any who would listen, keeping Owen's memory alive with every breath. When her time came, she faced it with the same courage she had shown on that train so long ago. Surrounded by her family in the big house Owen had built for her, Eleanor closed her eyes for the last time with a smile on her face, certain that somewhere beyond the veil, amber eyes were waiting for her, that a beloved voice would soon welcome her home. They buried her next to Owen in the cemetery on the hill overlooking Coloma, their matching headstones bearing simple inscriptions. Owen's read, beloved husband, father, and grandfather, a good man who found redemption in love. Eleanor said, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. The bravest woman, who chose love over fear. Their children made sure that the full story was recorded and preserved, written down so future generations would know how their family had begun. The tale of a train robbery in Arizona. A young woman's defiance, a man's choice to spare her life, and the love that had grown from that single moment of mercy. The lumber company continued for another 50 years before being sold, but the family Owen and Eleanor had created thrived and multiplied, spreading across the country, carrying forward the legacy of courage and love, and the belief that no past was too dark to overcome, that second chances were real, and that sometimes the best things in life came from the bravest choices. And on quiet evenings in Coloma, when the sun set over the mountains in shades of orange and gold, people swore they could sometimes see two figures on the porch of the old Navarro house, holding hands and watching the stars come out, together as they had always been, as they would always be, bound by a love that had conquered outlaws and distance and time itself. The train robbery had lasted perhaps 10 minutes. The love it sparked lasted a lifetime and beyond, rippling outward through generations, proof that a single moment of courage, a single choice to see the humanity in another person, could change the entire world. Eleanor had defied an outlaw and seen the man beneath the mask. Owen had spared a brave woman and found his salvation. Together, they had built something that death itself could not diminish. Their story became more than just family lore. It became a testament to the power of love, to the possibility of redemption, to the truth that sometimes the most dangerous gambles yield the greatest rewards. The descendants of Owen and Eleanor Navarro carried that story forward, telling it to their children and their children's children, keeping alive the memory of two souls who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would never die in the end. That was their true legacy. Not the lumber business or the wealth or the property, but the love. The fierce, brave, beautiful love that had started with a pair of amber eyes and a woman who refused to be afraid, that had grown through hardship and danger into something eternal. They had proven that love could conquer anything, could transform outlaws into honest men, could turn fear into courage, could build families and futures from the ashes of the past. And somewhere beyond the veil of mortality, in whatever place souls go to rest, Owen and Eleanor Navarro were together still, their hands clasped, their hearts beating as one, their love as strong as it had been that first day on the train. Forever brave, forever together, forever home.